Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for your time. Are we surprised at all at the outcome that's telling us that teacher absenteeism continues to be a big issue?
So thank you for inviting me, and good evening. I think that often the media tends to pay a great deal of attention to this particular issue, and I think it's not really paying attention to the really important issues that are emerging in the school monitoring survey. There's some really important good news stories here.
What for you are those?
So there's no doubt that the number of hours that teachers on average are spending in teacher development has gone up, and that's a really important development. But there are other things that are also really significant about this particular study. The amount of textbooks available to learners both at the grade 12 and at the more junior levels, that's also a very good news story. There's been a significant increase of access to the workbooks for learners. So those are really important parts of it. And they're things that we wouldn't normally pay attention to. 91% of all primary schools have grade R classes. A very important story. And the schools are now all consistently using SASAMs, one of the large-scale national computer systems. And, that doesn't really get much attention. That said, I think there are some serious challenges that the monitoring report does begin to pick up on.
Before we get to those, on the ones the good stories that you've already cited, if we take both, let's start with computers. It's like far from the ideal. It's like only a small portion of students that actually have access to that.
So the SASAMs are not computers for learners. These are essentially computerizing key administrative functions at the school level. So, for example, the registration of learners and the capturing of their marks. Up until now, we've never had a national database which registers learners, so we knew where learners are across the entire education system. So that's really an important development. It begins to streamline and begins to help assist managing the education system more effectively. And that's a really important development. It's a complex system, and they're beginning to get schools to use it effectively.
But then, with the textbooks, for example, one of the weaknesses or the problems is that it's varied across the grades. In other words, some doing a lot better than others. In other words, there's a great deal of inconsistency, if you like.
So I think the issue is about improvement. So there's no doubt that some provinces are more effective in ensuring that textbooks are provided to all learners than others. But there's been overall an improvement in the availability of textbooks. Obviously, if children aren't able to read the textbooks, it'll be of limited value. But it's a really good indicator that they're beginning to address what is a clear constitutional imperative, which is providing textbooks to learners.
The weaknesses in the system.
So I think the real challenges, and I think that need to be highlighted, are around school infrastructure. So school infrastructure, we're talking about the percentage of schools that are not meeting the minimum standards, and they're a significant portion, about 40%. But the real challenges are things that are really basic, like water and sanitation. And the report really makes it clear that we're still not serving a significant portion of children on what we consider to be a basic human dignity issue, which is to make sure that all schools have toilets, facilities that are at a minimum level, and that water is available at all schools, of high-quality water for all learners. There's also beginning to realize that there is a backlog of classrooms, and that we do need to address classrooms as a matter of urgency.
Now, on both those issues, you have a minister who says, we want to get out of that space, because she believes that the focus of her department should be on teaching and learning. She has come up with a proposal to set up a parastatal that she believes should do that work. Now, given that, which she said herself is what she would prefer, do you think there will be a lot of goodwill to actually deal with this matter?
So The issue of building and school infrastructure is obviously a very critical issue for South Africa to address. The quality of our school sanitation needs to be addressed. I'm not necessarily sure what the most effective vehicle for that would be. If we have a very, very focused institution, it may be better at delivering it than the provincial departments and even funding through the national department.
Well, the reason I'm asking you that question and asking it this way is because if you have the minister saying this is what she is thinking,
yes,
and over the past couple of years, you've actually seen her taking the NGOs that have really been pushing her to actually deliver on this mandate.
Yeah.
She's taken them to court, and she's really not shown a keenness to actually deal with the issue for a whole variety of reasons that she raises. And I'm saying, if that is what has been happening over the past few years, and then you add to that the fact that she has actually said it now in public, that she doesn't believe her department should be dealing with it, do you think this problem will then be resolved or at least dealt with, in the near future?
Look, I think the issue of infrastructure needs to be addressed. But what I do think the minister is saying, and I think she's right, if you look at the biggest challenge South Africa faces in terms of its education system, the real challenge is early grade reading and mathematics. At the moment, the vast majority of children, 80% of children, are going into the primary schools and they're getting to the end of grade 3 and they cannot read fluently in any of their 11 national languages. And she's correct. If there is one big challenge, it's about teaching and learning. Certainly, the infrastructure is a problem that we need to address, and we need a very efficient vehicle for addressing it. But she's correct in identifying teaching and learning as the main priority for the department, and for that she needs to be given credit.
Let's go to an issue that perhaps doesn't point or where fingers don't, point at her, and that is the issue of school governing bodies, where this report says that the percentage where school governing bodies meet the minimum criteria of effectiveness, and there is a lot of improvement that we need to see, because these are the people who over the years have actually been given enormous powers to actually run schools and oversee. I mean, they make key and very important announcements.
So certainly I think that there is definite space, or there's an imperative to improve the quality of professional development for our school governors. We elect them every 3 years. There is considerable churn amongst them, and we must make sure that the quality of the training that we provide for school governors is at the very highest level, and we also need to be better at monitoring how those schools are doing, to pick up where school governing bodies aren't able to do what they need to do, so we can address that issue of capacity up front.
That, of course, the responsibility is on us as parents and as communities, and perhaps has got little to do with the Department of Education and the people who are entrusted with that responsibility.
The legislation actually requires the school governing bodies to be empowered, so it does give a mandate to provincial departments to provide adequate training and support to governing bodies. Obviously, parents need to be motivated, but parents, by virtue of the fact their parents don't know what the regulations are, what the rules are, what the law is related to school governance, and particularly the more complex issues around finance, we need to provide them with support. We need to provide good quality training, and we need to check out to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. So I think the onus is on parents to come forward and to take responsibility.
Because there are
for their
people
schools.
with those with the sets of skills that these schools need.
And I think we need to recognize across South Africa, in schools, not only in the townships, but in rural communities and in our suburbs, there are people who are doing excellent work, who are really contributing their time and effort to making those schools good places to be. So I think I think that there is a need, though, for the provinces to come forward and improve the quality of professional development for our school governing bodies.
You reckon they are not doing that as perhaps best?
I think there are programs. So Matthew Ganiwe School of Leadership is the vehicle that is used in Gauteng for providing support to parents. I think it can be done better, and it could be done better across the country.
So we're going to leave it for tonight. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure.
For coming through. Education expert Bram Fleisch from the Wits School of Education.